Here we are, Wednesday, February 24th, 2020. And this is the last Wednesday in February, so it's my last talk on transition. Though, of course, not really, because all of the themes that we talk about here are these perennial themes that we keep coming back to. Otherwise, we might not be so interested in them. So, in a way, of course, we'll continue to speak about transition and learn about transition as we go forward. But I wanted today to give us a nice wrap up to the month of February and um, just really get down to the kind of the most clear principles of what transition is and my best advice. And then we have a few others that may be giving us some nice advice at the end, since the village is always more wise than the individual in my experience. All right. I have a few notes here to keep me from rambling. So transition is an experience where there is some shift, whether it's small or large, in our basic circumstances or priorities. And of course, a small shift can look like this. That's a transition, right? And a shift, as we know, can look like um, leaving this mortal body behind. That's another transition. And so, small or big, we're curious about the nature of transition because life seems to be just full of them. When one is going through a transition, it's it's going to be there's going to be change, and when you're going through transition, it's important to recognize that the shifting circumstances will shift our priorities. Um, they may they're going to shift where our resources are able to go. Um, in like the mental health, modern mental health realm, we talk sometimes about spoons. I don't know if you've ever heard this phrase before, like uh, you have to, I don't have any spoons left. Sometimes we in Nowhere Village do an exercise about your energy points, like how many energy points do you have in a day, and where do those energy points need to go, right? How many spoons do we have? And so thinking about when you're in a transition, recognizing that spoons that were going to what you're doing yesterday may have to be reappointed, right? Your time, your attention, your energy, your resources, um, they're going to necessarily have to adapt with the change. And again, we can look at a really small version of this. When the weather changes, I have to, change what I wear outside, right? I have to adapt. And I'm going to have to not just maybe pull out more resources in terms of, I don't know, maybe I have to go buy a warmer coat or something, but also I have to think about that. I have to, if I were to get up every single day and just have a uniform, for instance, I would spend less energy points uh, because I wouldn't have to be adapting. Make sense? So just thinking about the fact that any transition takes energy, and we only have a limited supply. Um, Now, transitions can become other things, or it's in their nature to be connected to other things. A transition can become a crisis. Last week, those of us in Texas were living through a crisis moment. Um, all of us have been living through the crisis of COVID. We've had other crises, come up in our lifetimes, and especially in really recent history. The largest crisis of all right now, in my opinion, and I'm not alone, is the environmental crisis. Because no matter what else is going on in this planet, we got to have one to do any of it. We can't even have crises. We can't even enjoy our crises unless we have a planet to enjoy them on, to live through them on. Okay, so how do we get to crisis? Now, of course, I'm giving examples of kind of tiny and big. Um, don't get too stuck if I bring up a big issue, right? We can bring it back down to things that we can keep talking about. But the reason that something becomes a crisis is because something essential can't survive that transition. Now, I again fully believe that there's no excuse for ruining this beautiful orb, in this vast universe. Um, but a lot of crises, right? So that's a crisis that I'm willing to stand up and say, this is a crisis. We got to fix this, and we got to do it now, right? This is another rule of crisis, is that the crisis is happening now. It has to. We have to bring our energy to bear on it now. It can't wait, right? But let's unpack this crisis thing just for a moment, um, because there are a lot of transitions in our lives that do not have to become a crisis, and even from a certain perspective, you know, Nisargadatta would probably say, why are you stressing about the planet? Right? It's going to do what it's going to do, or it wasn't here always and it won't be here always. So just, right, something like that, perhaps, at least not necessarily to tell me not to care, but to tell me not to worry. Um, but in our personal lives, there are a whole lot of things that we make into crises that we can bring them back to being just transitions, and thereby navigate them better, right? So, in order for something not to become a crisis, right? I said a crisis means that in this transition, there's something essential that's not going to make it through. Right? That's when we're afraid. Um, there's sort of two ways that we can shift that back. We can demote that back from crisis to just nice transition, right? Um, One is to adapt. Adapting takes energy points, right? But we can equip that part of ourselves to survive the crisis. And I'm going to go back to personal examples now. I think it's just a little easier for what I'm trying to describe. Before my divorce, that was my greatest fear. I wrote a whole piece on it. My greatest fear is losing my partner. And when I dug into that fear, I realized it's because I thought it would destroy me. I thought I wasn't equipped to start my life over without that partner. And I've been basically in that crisis since. And what I've been doing, and what I even had to do, honestly, before I was able to leave, is to start to equip myself to be someone who can be without that kind of partner. So I adapted, right? The other way that we can make something not a crisis is to let something die, to not adapt. And frankly, I've been doing that too. They actually go together. Letting something die is also, in a way, just letting go of that as an identity. And so I've been doing both. There's aspects like, aspects of Aaron that have survived and they've adapted. they've shifted, they've become empowered to survive that. And then there's other parts that haven't survived. There's parts of me that I have absolutely had to let go of, that didn't adapt. They just shifted, right? But in order to do that, I had to stop whatever it was that I was letting go of. I had to stop thinking that was me. Otherwise, I would stay in the crisis, even if my actual physical body was still here, um, even if I didn't have to be, right? My own story of identifying as this person who, for instance, I went from being a middle income person to a fairly impoverished person, you know? Um, and that was a part that died. I didn't just find another way to have a bunch of money. I let go of the identity of being a middle income person. And I didn't even realize how much actually so many of those privileges and class status things had become a part of my identity. I didn't even know. But the fact that I was clinging to them meant I thought they were me. I thought that if they died, I wouldn't be here in some substantial way. Okay. Now, transition can be crisis. Transition can also be positive transformation. The very thing that we come to meditation for, the very thing that we all want. Whatever survives the transition is transformed, period. It can be helpful to look, I always like to look at examples of whatever theme we're looking at in nature, right? Um, I actually just found a baby robin, or not a baby robin, sorry, a full grown robin um, dead on the road. Robins have been a very big theme for me, and some of you may remember that about this time last year, maybe a little later in the year, maybe like April of last year, I started to find robin's eggs. I found a few different robin's eggs, like almost fully still keeping their egg shape, but cracked in half. And I won't go into sort of the symbolism of that for me at the time. And then last week when I was going through a hard time, all of these robins surrounded this apartment. Apparently there's a lot of them all over Fort Worth, but all these robins surrounded this apartment and were singing to me. And I felt held and cared for. And my robin friends had come, even though I was stuck here by myself for a handful of days, feeling a little lonely, missing the family that I had been more hunkered down with before I moved into this apartment. And the robins came and I heard them singing. My blinds were shut. I heard them singing and I opened up one of my blinds. It was like, oh, wow, there's so many of you on the wires and the trees. And then I went around and opened up all my blinds, and out of every window, there were robins right outside my window singing to me and swooping around. And then I think it was the next day, the next day, I found this robin who died. And I don't know if it's some sort of symbolic closure to the baby robins that were being born and coming to me a year ago. Um, but I did gather the robin and wrap it in a shroud and buried it and did a little ceremony and a little service for the robin. The point is that transition for the robin was maybe not a crisis. That whatever is physical was left behind and is in the earth now, right? And will be decomposed to make fresh life, to feed the worms, to feed the next generation of robins. With consciousness comes the potential for imbuing a transition with crisis, with the kind of human consciousness that we have, the Robin absolutely, absolutely has consciousness. I don't mean to imply that it doesn't. But, um, and whatever it is that's non-material about the robin shifted to wherever it shifted. I can't pretend that I actually totally understand that aspect of things. But so both the material goes through its transformation, the spirit or the energy of the robin, whatever that is, goes through its transformation, it shifts. And there doesn't have to be a crisis. If the robin's identity were just earth, nature, robins in general, right? Trees, worms, soil, all of this is the robin, then it's just a shift. Transition is a process, right? It unfolds in stages. And most of the time when we're not appreciating a particular transition, it's because we can't accept a particular stage of the transition, right? Oh, a baby bird being born. We like that part, right? But if that baby bird is born, it will die. So that once we come to see that whole process as a whole, it becomes easier to move through the transitions, the cycles. In my elongated transition that I've been on, there's been a lot of destruction, right? A lot of tearing down of things that I had built. And that can feel really painful and hard. I don't like that part because, I've been enculturated to say, look, I put all that effort into it. I want it to last forever. I don't know, right? I put all that effort into all these aspects of it. Even the wedding itself, my goodness, how much energy, time, money, stress. And then you break it. And so there's resistance, you'll see for yourself what parts of the process of transition you have resistance to. Most of us have resistance to the death, the destruction, the letting go. But then again, there's all these other stages, all this other work that's gone into me rebuilding, right? There's the destruction and letting go. There's reorganizing. There's getting clarity about a new site, a new vision. Right? I have put spoons into like figuring out that I wanted to live in Texas for a year. It took a lot of time and energy and thoughtfulness and awareness to make that decision in a way that felt right. There's the foundational new construction, right? There's all the rebuilding. Then there's the settling into the new life and the new construction. This is taking a while. But as long as I keep moving through it, right, without getting stuck on any of the stages or kind of refusing to do any stage, because you can't rebuild without the destruction. You can't have rebirth without death. So if I'm not going to let go of that, I don't get to the other side of the transition. Okay, so I'm going to now just try to take all those sort of principles and just bring them down into the advice. How do we handle the truths of what I just shared? And I'm going to type these up and put them with this talk. Trust the process. You got to trust the process. Ride it, experience it, but you can't control it and you can't rush it. Crisis is in the now, and so awareness of the now is going to be key. Keep coming back to awareness. I want to just bring up like a couple other little images of transition before I go on, because I think they'll clarify what I'm about to say. Right? I gave you the kind of life, death transition, birth, death. Another really lovely one is the chrysalis, right? The caterpillar who becomes a butterfly, and that process. But again, look to your own experiences and your own versions of this process that work for you. When you're in the transition, right, when you're in the chrysalis, for instance, as things are shifting, you have different organs of perception. So your awareness is going to pick up different kinds of things in a transition than it would otherwise. In the song we just sang, he says, now she's in the air, radical and free. And that, I think about that sometimes, like I've been in the air, I feel like, through this last year, couple years. And surviving as an air creature is kind of new for me. So there's a lot that comes from that. But one is, I'm going to notice new stuff. I'm going to notice different things, not just because I'm in a different place, but because I am at this point an air creature rather than the land creature I was before transition and I will be after. So that's actually to say it might even feel like superpowers when you're in a transition. You get access to different intuition, different ways of perceiving, you make different connections. Be present for that. There are a lot of gifts in that. Oh, be honest about your spoons, right? Like I said before, be honest about your energy points. Be honest about the fact that if I'm up here flapping my wings and I'm not really built for flying, I'm not going to have this extra energy to do all this other stuff that I can do when I'm in my comfort zone. That's okay. Be pretty stoked that you can fly, you know? I mean, use your energy for that. You are going to have to take energy away from other stuff, right? Whatever that looks like. Gentle, be gentle. Be gentle with yourself. Don't take any big actions when you're in transition. Don't take any big actions if you can. Don't make any big drastic decisions. Usually there's something drastic already happening that put you here. Don't try not to make any really big moves. Now, that doesn't mean you can't make decisions. And like I said, definitely don't shut off your intuition. Definitely notice if you feel a call to make a big drastic move, note it. Don't ignore it. Don't repress it. Write it down. Talk to a friend about it. Do whatever you need to do. Just don't act on it quite yet. You've heard the advice, don't change horses midstream, right? It's another transition, right? There's a horse and a human becoming a water creature. They're land creatures, and to this, it's dangerous in transition. We're vulnerable in transition. It's hard enough. All our spoons are pretty much occupied, right? So don't do more big transitioning while you're transitioning if you can. But do note, because again, you're going to be aware of, you're going to be getting information. Don't ignore it, but don't act on it right away. Stay simple and light, right? You're crossing this stream, not just physically simple and light, right? Meaning take care of your body when you're going through transition, but be light on your stories, your ideas, like see what you can put down. Okay. Understand that some things that were very trustworthy and very supportive before may not be supportive or trustworthy or helpful now, right? You've always had the ground underneath you and now you're going through the stream or you're up in the air. It's different. Find out what you can trust. You've got to trust something as you get through it. What can you trust? Spend time with them. Your sources. your most trustworthy and loving sources. Call on them, go to them, ask for help. Your values, what you really, really know, right? No matter what, there are certain principles that I believe in that have not shifted an iota, even though everything material about my life has changed. So find what's stable and build your deepen your relationship with it. Find what's changing. Find what's not the same, right? And learn how to process that. Learn how to acknowledge, how to be aware of what's going to change and process it. Part of this will probably be some mourning of the parts that have to die, but also make space for celebrating what will be born. And to that end, I want to also say do what you can to find clarity about what you do want, what's calling you forward, and be really honest about it. Be honest that you don't know what the shape will actually take, but be honest about the fact that there is something that you want to land into, and try to be really, really honest about it. Ask your sources to help you get there safely. But this can be a very confusing experience being in transition. And the more, something we're going to talk about next month a lot, but if we have a lot of conflicting desires, we will absolutely have a conflicted, chaotic experience. We just will. And look out in particular for wanting to be where you were or where you're gonna be, because then you're missing out on all the information that's actually here inside the transition, right? So there's a big acceptance, right? Learn how to accept that you're not where you were once and you're not where you might yet be. Make peace with that. But also don't be afraid to actually get clear and say to yourself what you want to see and feel and experience on the other side. Okay. I would like to now open it up. And I wanted to close today's talk with just a couple little lines from other community members. And as they're typing, oh, great, I've already got one. I'm going to wait for a couple more to come in. Um, oh, thanks, Judy. Bye. As you know, maybe there's one or two more of those coming in. I will just share a little bit about next month, because that's next week. Transitions just keep happening. So March 2021, we are focused on right relationship here in Nowhere Village. This is an online course, so it's open to to non-members. They can subscribe and participate. And so first off, I would love for you, anyone who has been appreciating the work that we do here, please invite a friend to this. Yeah, and it's really great work to do in conversation with a friend too. So I encourage that. We will have a really familiar schedule to what we've been doing here. It should all feel very familiar, but the content will be specifically about how to build right relationship with the self, with the other, how to recognize, and with the whole, the all. It'll be about how to recognize when relationships are out of balance, or we need more support in a relationship, and how to get a relationship back into balance. And there will be, more so than there has been in a while for us, focus on creative expression, authentic communication, and so there was a little bit more focus on art practice, but art specifically as the expression of our authentic self. And so that's something that I'm also really looking forward to incorporating in a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to share. Okay, great. I'm going to share a little wisdom now to close us up. So here's Judy's reflection on her month of working with transition. She says, it's been a very powerful month for me. Transitions has made me start to dig deeper. Today, you really summarized beautifully many things that have been coming up for me. I can't wait to re-listen to this. I greatly appreciated Pam's post. This is a wonderful room. Thank you all for being a safe space. And then Pam says, at those points when I feel really stubborn in transition, I try to ask myself, is there another way to see this? What do I need now? And what do I take with me, hold close and dear, often the love of my family? Oh, I love that. I love that. Yeah, so Pam's come up with her own sort of little inquiry practice to help her come back and to, help her get back to what can take her through that transition. I love that. And that's sort of what I was saying. She says, what do I take with me? Hold close and dear. Yeah, that's sort of what I was saying about like find your sources or your values. What stays the same throughout? Beautiful. Okay, Holly says, thanks for this talk. One thing I like to remember is the idea that there is a beginning, middle, end. Whew. Yes, to know there is another side helps. I love that. I love that. And I sometimes, when I teach the breath, say, be with the beginning, the middle, the end of the inhale. Beginning, middle, end of exhale, right? Right there in the breath, reminding us everything that's changing in nature has that. Oh, and then Holly wants to add, be with what is happening in the transition. That's great. So Sage sent me a little thing, which I'm going to see if I can open easily. Oh, this is lovely. Okay. So Sage wrote this little piece here. Okay, I'm going to read this, and I think this is probably going to take us on home. So my last little contribution. Okay, it's called Horses. That's perfect. It's one of our themes today. We're traveling well beyond where our horses can go. Spirited whinnies left billowing in the dust bowl. Their stoic stance sits atop knobby knees, gnarled and grinding against the rips and tears of threaded earth. Eyes splinter the ego of light, a clash of obstruction undone, a trail lost, the truncated shadow of another fallen horse, our only guide. We will go beyond where our horses are able to travel. We'll remember their soft and blind fumbling lips searching our open hand for a sugar cube. We'll forget parched lips never quenched, strong backs broken, unbound now, weak but free, hooves thick with crusted mud, heavy under our mount, notched leather taut against the round, empty-bellied beast. Nostrils flare, extinguishing the surrounding air with each halted step. Once soft and long eyelashes close shut, iron trussed gates over dreamless eyes. We'll go far beyond where our horses will carry us. We won't look back for fear of falling forward. Wow. Wow, Sage, thank you. I wasn't expecting that. Thank you. Ooh, and we'll close with Laura's comment. Thank you, Laura. Thank you for being here. She says, I have been in transition for such a long time, and my first challenge has been cultivating trust in the process and in myself. This is the major work I've been doing. And the other is what you talked about, which is gathering information from the transition and just being. I am finally at peace and feel prepared for what's next. I loved what you said about becoming an air creature. That is absolutely what I am now, and I feel so free. Oh, thank you. I so appreciate all of these shares. I'm feeling really moved. And Sage says it's a little heavy, but also hopeful. Yeah, that's it. That's life. Right? Like that's kind of what we're talking about, right? We're not afraid of the heavy here. And I feel like we can get to that real hopefulness, not a false hope, and not that kind of saccharine hope, if we acknowledge that this stuff is hard. It is heavy and also light. It's all here. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. This has been a really powerful morning for me. I really appreciated being with you all. For everyone watching, thank you for being here. And I hope you comment and share some of your wisdom. It's always my favorite part when other people share their wisdom. So please comment if you're watching and participate with us that way. And anybody who typed in, feel free to post something fuller in the anywhere in Nowhere Village. Just put a little post up there if you want to share. Okay. So grateful for all of you.